OODAcast, informing your decisions with intelligence, analysis, and insight. Brought to you by the team at OODAloop.com.
Megan, Jaffer, welcome to the OODAcast. Thanks for joining us today.
Bob, oh my goodness. I just am so thrilled to be here with you. I love catching up with you normally outside of a podcast, but I'm honored and just thrilled to be here. So thanks for inviting me.
Well, thanks for saying that. I just can't wait to get into a discussion about what you've been doing, what you're up to now, and what's coming next. And for those who haven't met you, the way I would describe you today is you are now officially an institution in the intelligence community.
Oh, wow.
With the Iron Butterfly Media Group and your podcast, where you're highlighting so many stories of great leaders from the Intel community. And that is extremely influential now. And I have seen that. It's being listened to in academia, it's being listened to in the Intel agencies, and it's a very inspirational thing you've created.
Wow, that gave me chills. Thank you. I've never heard anyone describe it that way. We started out as a small little project that we were doing for fun during COVID. And people keep reminding me that I can't think of us that way anymore. We are past the infancy stage, and they said, you're not a little project anymore. So thank you very much. That was quite a compliment.
Well, before getting into the Iron Butterfly podcast, can you tell us more about yourself and your background and how you got into this?
Sure. I'm from the northwest suburbs of Chicago. I grew up there pretty much my whole life. I come from a big extended family. My mom's one of 10, and we're all real close. I have lots of cousins, lots of aunts and uncles. My dad was a Green Beret. However, I never knew him as that. He was in the service before I was born, and actually didn't even know he had been in the service until I was 12 years old, until my grandma had passed away. And I saw all of the news clippings. And, service in our family, whether it was to the country or to your community or to your family or friends, was really, really important. And I always knew that was kind of my calling. And my sister as well. She is a teacher right now. She's always been a teacher. And, I went to school undergrad at DePaul University in Chicago, and studied international relations. I loved Asia, and I loved it because I've told this story before. I always feel uncomfortable sharing this, but people say it's exciting. So here it goes. I took Taekwondo for a very long time, since the age of 10. And I was a competition fighter, and I had spent 12 years of my life. That was my life. And Taekwondo is a Korean sport, and I learned a lot about Korea and East Asia because of my involvement in that. And so I knew when my parents were never going to let me go to Korea when I was in high school, but I knew my goal was, when I graduated at college, I wanted to go to Korea and spend a year there learning the language. And so I was super lucky. My Korean professor in college literally put together a special summer program basically for me, where my class was going to go to Korea and do kind of a 2-week cultural exchange type of program. And then she was going to leave me there. And she got me a job teaching English while I was there. And then she was going to bring all the students back home. And so I did that year of teaching English while I was taking a Korean kind of immersion course in Daejeon, South Korea, which is about 3 hours south of Seoul. And I was teaching at Kongju Communications Art College. I had to do the translation real quick in my head. And I fell in love. And so I found a graduate school program in Seoul that I applied to. And I applied, and I didn't get in the first time. And I went to the dean and I said, look, I know I didn't go to an Ivy League school. I know that my grades were not straight A's in college. However, I'm going to keep applying to your program until you let me in, because this is what I really want. And so the next the next semester, I applied again and he let me in. And so I went to Yonsei University in Seoul, and I majored in Korean studies. And at that point, I knew I wanted to work in the intelligence community, being I thought an area expert, focused on East Asia. And I spent 5 years there, and it was fantastic. I came back in 2007, which was kind of that lull and downturn in the IC and the national security space post 9/11, where they had done tons of hiring post 9/11, and then they did like a freeze. And so I had a really hard time getting in because they had a freeze. And so I moved here to DC, and I had to pay the bills. And so I started working at nonprofits. I worked in nonprofit management and all different types of nonprofits to pay the bills while I was applying to all the government jobs. And one of those institutions and events that I would go to was INSA, the Intelligence and National Security Alliance.
That's where I first saw you, Megan.
Is it?
Yep.
Well, INSA is like a family to me, because they literally gave me my career. I will give them that 100%, because.
How did they find you?
So I found them. I went because I wanted to I wanted a toehold in the community, because I wasn't in yet. I was applying. I needed to network. So I started going to their events. And because of this was kind of bold of me, but and Suzanne, the president of INSA, she has a different story. You should ask her one day what her story is about meeting me. But so one day I asked, Suzanne was the VP at that time, and Chuck Alsup was, I think, the president at that time. And I went to him and I said, I had dinner with them. I said, I'd like to have dinner with both of you. And I presented this presentation and I said, I have nonprofit experience, and these are the ways I think I could help you, because I felt like if I could even get a job with INSA, that might help me, eventually getting into government. And Chuck said, Megan, why don't you just volunteer with us? And he was actually quite brilliant. He said, why don't you come to all of our events? So why don't you come and volunteer on all the events? You can start networking. You'll come to the events for free. We'll start introducing you to folks. And he put me at the registration table, which was the perfect place to be, because I got to meet everyone. I got to know who they were, where they worked, and they got to meet me.
You're looking right in the eye, and this is your badge.
Yeah. And that's how it all began. It literally was just, I like to tell people, when you're thinking about, your volunteer work and where you're spending your time, it should A, be what you're passionate about, but B, it can be a little strategic. And I knew that this was what I wanted to do. And I was lucky that they allowed me to come on and help them out. And at the same time, I was able to network and meet people. And I got my first job in the community because of Ellen McCarthy.
Well, Megan, let me say, I'm not a real psychoanalyst, but I think you've given me some insights into your personality and your leadership style here. And here's what I mean. Twice in this conversation, you mentioned examples of where you decided to be proactive and reach out and tell somebody, hey, I would like to do this. And It reminds me of a Steve Jobs story he told in 2005, where as a very young kid, he said he needed a part, and he decides to call the founder of Hewlett-Packard, Hewlett, and say, hey, you don't know me, but I'm in your neighborhood. Would you happen to have a radio frequency oscillator detector that I could borrow? And he's like, sure. And Steve Jobs uses that as a story to say, look, if you want something, you got to be proactive and reach out. So you reminded me of that Steve Jobs anecdote there.
Well, and it's funny when you repeat it back to me, because I'd like to tell people that that's actually, I don't actually feel like that's my nature. When I came here, I'm from the Midwest. We don't like to really we don't like to kind of market ourselves or promote ourselves or tell people why we're great and what we do. And that was really hard for me when I came here, was to go, the asking to participate and asking to volunteer wasn't hard, but being in the room and having to kind of sell yourself and your skills, that was not natural for me. And that was something I had to learn.
Yeah, that's not natural for me either. It's really not.
Yeah, it's tough.
So from there, how did you get from INSA into what you're currently doing?
So there was a step that I skipped. So before Ellen gave me my first job in the community, because I was so active in INSA, in 2000, I can't even remember, 2015, 40 women were invited to Ellen's house for this reverse mentoring night. And it was 20 junior women. And when I say junior and senior, I mean in rank, not in age. And so there were 20 junior women and 20 senior women invited, and I was invited. I mean, grace of God that happened, because I wasn't actually in the community yet, but I was just so active in INSA that I was invited. And that night we sat around, we were at Ellen McCarthy's house. It was in her living room, and we sat around, and I like to talk about this, that it was pre-Me Too. It had, I say that because it had nothing to do, our conversation really had nothing to do with men. And it had everything with how men were treating us in the community, or that dynamic. And it had everything to do with how women were promoting, mentoring, coaching, and bringing each other along in our community, and how we needed to start doing that for ourselves. So kind of creating like a good old girls club, like the guys do for themselves. And there's nothing wrong with that. We should be promoting each other. We should be lifting each other up. And the end of that night, we all agreed, all 40 of us, that we should start a group and we should start an organization. And they said, well, who would like to lead this? And I promise you, I thought the whole room was going to raise their hand, and only 2 of us did. And it was me and Heather Crody, who Heather is no longer in the community. She was tangentially, she was doing, I think, marketing communications for one of the government contractors at the time, and now she's moved on. And so that's where the Amazing Women of the IC was born. And so I started leading that with a group of 10 other committee members. And it was there that Ellen saw, she didn't know me. I never worked for her. The only thing she saw was INSA and what I was doing with AWIC. And she brought me to Noblesse when she moved to become the president of Noblesse NSP. And so how I got here is, since then, there's been lots of in-betweens. But I have been able to use my nonprofit experience, which I literally thought it was wasted time when I was in it. And now I use that experience every single day. I have since founded or co-founded 4 nonprofits that all help support the IC. And AWIC is still alive and running. It's being run by Maggie Hackney at OODA, who's amazing. And right around the time that COVID started, at that time, Katie Nockwin, she was at the time a DIA analyst, and she was running AWIC at that time. I had passed the baton. She was the person I passed the baton to at that time. And she came to me and she said, look, it was around June of right when COVID had started. And she said, I'm listening to all these podcasts, and, there are podcasts in the national security space, and they're all great, right? But they're all topical. They're all talking about, the topics of the day, whether it's, Russia and Ukraine, or it's Israel and Hamas, or it's North Korea, or it's Cuba, whatever it is. But we're not really telling the stories of the people behind the work. And in our line of work, as you know, they are very linked, the people, the mission and the job. And she said, I think there's something here. And I will tell you honestly, I said, that sounds great. Go forth and do it. And she said, no, I want you to do it with me. And I was like, no, I'm trying to get stuff off my plate. I got too much stuff going on. And I'm not going to be a host of a podcast. Are you crazy? I don't even have social media. She said, Megan, I can't do it, because she was currently in government and she couldn't be upfront. And she said, I will be the background. We will support each other. You just have to, you will just be out front. And so she talked me into it. And it started with one season. And we did it just like we're doing right now in our house. Like I'm in my house right now. I had my AirPods and we were doing it during COVID. And then after season one, it just blew up in a good way. We started hearing all this feedback. We had already been put on a couple syllabi at universities, and we were being told, and that's how it all started.
Awesome. That's great. And you call it Iron Butterfly. Why is that?
So Iron Butterfly is the code name of Eloise Page. And Eloise Page was, she was actually one of the first employees at CIA when it was established in 1947. And she worked in the DO as a case officer and worked her way up to being the first female chief of station at CIA. And the men, at that time thought they labeled her a fierce fighter with a core of steel. And so her code name was Iron Butterfly. And we feel, just saying it, I get chills every time. And we feel that all of the women that we interview, embody a little piece of her, a little bit of the Iron Butterfly. And so that's why we named it Iron Butterfly. And, little joke, little quip here is that not to be confused with the 80s rock band Iron Butterfly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you mentioned her, because I really have never heard of her. And I think it just underscores the point that there's so many great women through history that have not had their stories highlighted. Now, we hear of some in the OSS age. Virginia Hall
Yep.
really probably deserves a lot more credit than Bill Donovan himself. Or is that a sacrilegious statement to say? Well, anyway, in my opinion, she was a planner and a doer who executed on intelligence missions in ways that Bill Donovan really couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
So probably many examples of stories like this that should be highlighted.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, we've gone back in history a couple of times. But, Sue Gordon, for all of you out there who are from our community that are listening, I don't even have to give you an explanation of who Sue is, because you all know who that fabulous woman is. She told us, she tells us that she's one of our biggest, honest to God, biggest supporters and mentors of Iron Butterfly. And she says, you and Katie are documenting history with these podcasts. And now these women won't be forgotten. There are a lot of women throughout history that we don't know, that, their histories weren't captured. And I really do like to think about it that way, that we are, capturing all the women that we're highlighting. We're capturing history.
Right. Now, tell me if this is an unfair question.
Okay.
Do you have any favorite stories that you've captured while doing this?
So there are no favorites. It's like children. There are no favorites, but I learn something from every single episode. And I mean, there are some that are emotional. There are some that are fun. There are some that are just so informational that I'm learning. I could give you, I'll give you a few examples. So early on, and I know we'll talk about this a little bit later. So I can't tell you if this is referenced from her podcast, or she is also in our documentary, Carmen Medina. And one of the lessons I've learned from her is about leadership. And she has said to me that, no human being likes to be embarrassed, and no human being likes to be humiliated. And so when you really think about that, the way you engage with people and the way you talk to them and the way you lead, if you keep that in mind, you'll be better off. And I know it seems very simple, but you often forget that. People make little jokes, or they might criticize in front of other people. And so that was a lesson in leadership that I always take with me. I think as far as a story, Maria Whitcup, she was career FBI, and she tells a story about engaging with, they had arrested a man who had murdered a young woman. And she tells the story about how, you really have to be in that position that she was in, to sit in front of a murderer that had murdered this woman, and he's telling you that he has murdered this woman. You do have to listen. And she told the story of what he told her of why he murdered her. There was no excuse, right? But her point was, sometimes you have to reach instead of push. And it was a shocking story when she told it, but it was also, it was beautiful in the way that she looked at her job and what her role was. And hers was another good one. And then, another recent one, and this will be my last, I promise. And again, no favorites. I'm just giving you a free on the top of my head. Christy Scott. She is a privacy and civil liberties lawyer in the IC. And, one of my, and you will appreciate this, one of my big pet peeves is the way Hollywood and those folks that are outside of our community, really the way they portray the intelligence community, and in particular NSA, and how there is this perception, false, that NSA is tracking everyone's phone calls and everyone's emails. And it kind of makes me giggle, but also infuriates me, because no one really cares about your emails or your text message. And logistically, that it is just impossible for them to be tracking all of those things. But we had a really fun and informational discussion about that. And it was on the heels of me listening to another podcast with Joe Rogan, where he literally says on his podcast that NSA tracks everybody. And I was all fueled because I just listened to that podcast, and I said, let's demystify this, let's talk about this. And so she was able to, she was very teachable in a relatable way. And so that was just this past season.
Well, a couple thoughts. One, I would say on that topic, I think everybody who listens to your podcast in academia and government realize that our intelligence community is so ethical and follows the law and has oversight from both Department of Justice and Congress to make sure they follow the law. And if there are mistakes made, there are remediations to those mistakes. And I'm so proud of that. And I think your podcast underscores that quite frequently. Let me tell you my favorite of your podcasts.
Okay.
Is maybe I shouldn't have favorites because they are all wonderful.
No, but you can have favorites. Okay. I'm just like the mom, so I can't have favorites.
Well, a person I have long looked up to and has been a friend and a mentor is Dawn Myricks. I got the pleasure of working with her back when she was at DISA as the CTO, and I was in the first DoD Cyber Command, the Joint Task Force Computer Network Defense. And I watched her in action doing things that people don't talk about now, but were really preparing the Department of Defense for crisis. And when 9/11 happened, there was almost, it seemed like instantaneous satellite communications over the Middle East. That wasn't instantaneous. People like Dawn had been building out the communications infrastructure and leasing satellite communications and leasing terrestrial communications. they were also forming relationships with the telecom providers to have priority access for DoD if there were ever a crisis. The crisis hits, it's a horrible event, but thanks to forward thinkers like Dawn, we were able to more quickly respond. And I got to work with her throughout the Intel communities, her time in the Intel community periodically. And I, as a technologist, always appreciated things like the way she had addressed interoperability, or how to plan systems that work together and how to better acquire systems. And of course, when she was at CIA, she's done some pretty amazing things that I'm not cleared to see, but I know that she did a lot of amazing things. But what I didn't know was what I learned from your podcast, which is her long-term view on things, and how it's a very motivational for me to think about that, leaving a legacy as a heritage oak, she called it. Something that you plant now, and people 200 years from now will be perhaps sitting in the shade under that tree you plant. I like that.
Oh man, Dawn is just, she's wonderful. And she's in our documentary, and rightly so. You'll hear a lot, you'll learn a lot more from her through that as well. And she's everything. I mean, she's super smart. And she is as kind as can be. And let me tell you, she's also really fun. She's really fun. We did a little behind the scenes for you, Bob. We did, when we shot the documentary, we did it kind of all over the country, but we got the women together in Idaho at the end so that we could all be together, and we had a little outing. And Dawn is just, she's fun. She's the best. So I love that you love that episode, because
there were
great.
so many others too. Carmen Medina, a lot to learn from her. One of the greatest analysts the Intel community has ever had.
100%, yes.
And something came clear from your podcast, also has a lot of leadership lessons I think we should all pay attention to.
Yes, something that if anyone takes anything away from Carmen is you're never going to hear the same thing. I mean, you'll never be able to guess her response to something. Carmen was one of my first mentors, and I've known her since basically I've moved here to DC, and I never know. I could ask her the same question 10 times, and I never know the answer that she's going to give me. She's also just, she is the textbook definition of out of the box thinker. Her mind works different in a different way than most. And I think that's why she was a brilliant analyst. And yeah, she's great.
Yeah. Well, let me mention me. In the Intel community, I was an analyst, an Intel officer in the Navy, but the last part of my career was a chief technology officer at Defense Intel Agency. And I would tell people that I like people and technology, just not in that order. And people would laugh. But of course, really, one thing your podcast underscores for me is this is not about the technology. It's about the people and the leaders. And you can be a great technology leader, but you still have to focus on the fact that it's human beings that we're doing this for. And they're really, that's the core element of the Intel community.
Absolutely. It's not just it's not just the human, it is the human beings that are behind it. And then it's the human beings that we're doing this for, the ones that we're protecting, the ones that we are supporting. It's just, it's the humans, period. Like it is about people, period. No matter which way you look at it. So I'm glad that comes across, because I mean, it was the intention in a way, but I'm just glad that people see that.
Right. Now, would love to talk, Megan, more about what you're up to now and what's coming next for the podcast.
Wow. So, at the end of this year, at the end of 2023, I told my team, Katie and I both. So Katie and I are the co-founders. Katie Naquin and I are the co-founders of Iron Butterfly. And we both asked the team, to reflect on the year. And we were, because everyone has a different role, and we were going to put together kind of an end of year newsletter. And most people thought that it was for, the folks that we sent it out to, which were our supporters, and we posted on LinkedIn so the people who, our audience could look at it. But really, it was a big portion of it was for the team, and for me, really, and for Katie, to kind of look back and say, holy cow, we're always, it doesn't matter who you are, you have these goals, and you hit them, and then you're moving forward already, and you're constantly looking at what has to be done next, what's the next milestone. And you don't often, just pause and take a look back and say, holy cow, look at what we've accomplished. And we did that in December to look at just the year of 2023. And it has been so amazing. I don't want to get emotional, but, in the past year and a half, and we've had, I don't even know right now, Iron Butterfly Media is 3 years old, but just in the past year and a half, we have built our team to 6. We are on our 6th season of Iron Butterfly podcast. We have been able to build out our podcast studio so that we can host the guests in person, so that you could see us, because for 4 seasons we were just audio only, and so now you can see us, you can see the guests. We never did this for money. That was never the purpose. And however, as we were bringing on team members and we were building, we realized we had to bring in revenue. And so we built a sponsorship model that works for us, that highlights other women. It's not the traditional model where it's just, here's the podcast and sponsored by, name your company. It's highlighting other women at other companies, which we just really stand behind. It's at the core of who we are. We are adding a second podcast in June called Women in the Arena, which will be hosted by Army veteran Sarah Scully, and she's going to be interviewing military women, both in and out. And that's really fantastic. It's building out an umbrella of podcasts. We're hoping in the next year, we will be adding 2 more podcasts, and both of them will not be in the national security space at all. Our hope is to grow, national security is our foundation. We will always be true to that. But we want to bring this, we want to build this, that we want this to be a movement. We want to share stories of women in different communities, in different jobs, and highlighting different things that amazing women are doing across the world. So stay tuned. We're hoping we're going to add at least 1 more this year, and we're hoping 5 in a year from now. With the media company in particular, we kind of mentioned this a little bit, but we produced and directed the first documentary on women in the intelligence community last year. We are in post-production right now. Post-production is very expensive, Bob, and we are still raising money so we can finish that. The goal is to finish it by the end of the year. We do want to submit it to some film festivals and hopefully get it picked up by a streaming platform eventually. That's really exciting. And then, we're traveling now. We're doing live podcast episodes at different universities. We're trying to engage with different universities, not only in the Beltway, but outside of the Beltway. And that's media. And then something that most people don't know is that we founded a 501c3 called Iron Butterfly Foundation with our chairwoman, which is Suzanne Heckenberg at INSA. We referenced her earlier. And what we're doing there is, Iron Butterfly Media is the first touch point with these women, right? And that's where they see us, they hear us, but we want a place where they can land and grow, and a place where they can ideate, and a place where they can get support, because we believe all women are creators and all women have amazing ideas. And sometimes they just don't have the resources or support to execute on those ideas. And that's what the foundation is going to be about. So, that's what we're doing.
Megan, I'm just like blown away at all this stuff. And you're making great progress in so many fronts. And it makes me think, did anybody ever tell you that this is impossible and you can't do this?
We don't really, I don't surround myself with people who tell me those things. I surround myself with people that are believers and manifestors and, you know, all the things that we've been able to dream. We have a saying, we have a sign in our office, in our studio that says, "I have a crazy idea." We all have crazy ideas,
Yeah.
but we believe that every crazy idea can be executed. It's honestly about having the resources, having the time, and putting in the effort. And so you literally can do anything you want if you have those three things. And those three things, you know, are hard sometimes. But yeah, I
Well,
don't surround myself with
another
people
Steve
who tell me
Jobs
no.
reference. You remind me of this famous poem that he commissioned. Here's to the crazy ones.
Oh yeah. Oh, we love the crazy ones. And we dream, we have dream sessions all the time where we sit and we're like, okay, what do we want to do? What's the next crazy idea? What's the next dream? How do we do it? And then we surround ourselves with people who will say, okay, you know, I didn't. Are you kidding? Katie and I are both from the IC. I didn't even know documentarian was a word until I started a documentary. And we were lucky. We reached out to people who were in that space, in the film space. And we said, is this a crazy idea? And they said, no. And we said, can we do it? And they said, yes. And then they mentored us through the process. So here we are.
This is all exciting, and I can't wait for the
Thanks.
documentary.
Me too. Me
So
too.
please let us know as soon as you announce the launch date for that and the launch party. I want to be there.
Oh, you'll be there. And if anyone who knows me knows that I love to throw a party and I love swag. That's another little secret about me. So there will be tons of Iron Butterfly swag.
You got swag now, right?
I do. We have on our website. So our website is ironbutterflymedia.com, www.ironbutterflymedia.com. We have a store with our swag on there. Our foundation website is being built as we speak. It should be up in the next couple of weeks, which is super exciting. Yeah, you can find out if you want to learn more about us on our website. We are also active, as I said, on LinkedIn. We're active on Instagram as well. We're building because, you know, our foundation is the IC, so Instagram wasn't always friendly, and so we're building that community. But yes, that's where you can find us.
Awesome. Megan, thanks for all this today. I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate all the stories you've been telling in the podcast. It's so inspirational.
Oh, Bob, thank you so much. This was so fun. And I think I told you this before we actually started recording, but I was a little nervous to come on today. I'm not sure why, but you made it super comfortable and a lot of fun. And I'm just really grateful. I'm grateful for you having me on. I'm grateful for all the things you do. And, you know, thank you on behalf of everyone for your service to our country.
Oh, thanks for saying that, Megan. I really appreciate it. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Well,
Thanks for listening to this OODA Loop production. For the latest analysis on cybersecurity, technology, and global risks, please visit www.oodaloop.com.